And it's fair to say that for pretty much every human being, the road to death is the last road that we walk, but not for Jesus. Because the thing is that Jesus died, but he didn't stay dead. Jesus is alive. That's what makes today such a significant day. And if it's not true that Jesus is alive, then to say that he is an absolutely outrageous claim to make, isn't it? But if he is alive, then it changes absolutely everything. There is nothing that is untouched by this one truth. Now, the thing is, to say this, we've got to have evidence, haven't we? We've got to have facts. And it's almost like, we want like one of these old-style police boards, where all the bits of string lead to the right conclusion. But how much does it take to make us believe? And actually, what difference does it make to us if he's alive or not? Well, let's go back to the first Easter. By the way, good job, kids. Really good job. I love the fact that they even managed to get, a 12-week-old baby to say alive. How'd you do that? That kid's a genius. But going back to the first Easter, so Jesus has died, his body's been taken down from the cross, he's been wrapped in burial clothes, and he's been placed in a tomb that doesn't belong to him. A stone has been rolled across the entrance, and so begins the Sabbath. And it is a hopeless and a dark Sabbath where his followers can't do anything. And they're so perplexed, they're so confused, because he'd said all the way along the line, he'd been dropping these little breadcrumb trails saying, I've got to die, and actually it's for your benefit that I die. He said crazy things like, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. He told them that his death was going to produce something good, but now he was dead and they just didn't get it. But then comes the first day of the week, Sunday morning. Mary sprints to the tomb before the sun comes up, and she sees that the stone has been rolled away and the body is gone. And so she runs back to get more of his followers, and she finds Peter and John. Peter and John run to the tomb. They look into the tomb. They see that the grave clothes are there where they should be if a body was there, but there's no body in them. And John sees this, and he believes. And he's not quite sure what he believes, but he believes something. He's got some evidence at this point. And they run back into town, and Mary's on her way back to the tomb. And when she gets to the tomb, there are two angels there. And they say, "What's up, Mary? Why are you crying?" She's like, "They've taken my Lord." And then she's done with her conversation with them, and she comes across this guy who she takes to be a gardener. And he says, "What's up?" She's like, "They've taken his body. Show me where his body is. Actually, if you just show me where it is, I'll carry it. I'll take it myself." I mean, that's a bold claim, isn't it? She must have been kind of quite buff to be able to do that. But then this gardener, he says one word to her. He says, "Mary." Nobody ever spoke her name like this guy spoke her name. And immediately she had all the evidence that she needed. He's alive. And she clings to his legs, and he says, No, the job's not done yet. Go. Instead, what I want you to do is to get into town, go and tell my friends, go and tell my brethren, go and tell my brothers that I'm alive. And so she does. Mary practices her new skill of going and telling. She is the first person in the Bible that gets the opportunity to go and preach the good news that Jesus is alive. And she goes and she tells, but they clearly don't believe her. Because unlike Jesus, who was broken out of his lockdown to death, his disciples are still locked down to fear in this room. They heard the words, Jesus is alive, but they didn't believe it. What is it going to take to make them believe? And then there they are in this locked room, and lo and behold, while the door is locked, Jesus appears through the door, and he says, "Peace be to you." Now, put yourself in their sandals. If you were in that room and somebody that you knew had just died, and the door was locked, and that person appeared in the room, you would need somebody to say, "Peace be to you," at that point, wouldn't you? Because no, I'm not going to say that. I don't need to say that. But you're going to need somebody to say, "Peace be to you." And actually, it goes further than that, because the thing is, Jesus himself is peace. He is the one who, when he is present, nothing is missing and nothing is broken. And so, when he says, "Peace be to you," peace is with them because he is with them. And then he shows them what they need in order to believe. He shows them his wounds. And they look at him and they see these wounds of a dead man on a body that is more alive than any body has ever been. This body that can now do new things. It can pass through doors. It can pass through space. It doesn't need to walk there anymore. And they see these wounds of a dead man on a very, very living body, and they are overjoyed. They celebrate. And then Jesus breathes on them. I think it's only Jesus that can get away with this. Now, in these days after the last 2 years, you know, if somebody comes up to you and breathes on you, you're not going to be chuffed, are you? But actually what Jesus is doing at this point, he's kind of looking back to the creation of the world where God breathed his Spirit into the first people and said, come be part of what I'm doing in this world. And he's restarting creation. You know, on this first day of the week, Jesus is restarting creation. This is the beginning of the new creation. But not only that, he's breathing on them in a kind of like a teaser trailer of what he's going to do in about 50 days' time when he sends the Holy Spirit, and he's going to fill them with his power and his presence, and he's going to commission them to be a community of people that proclaim his forgiveness and his reconciliation and is making all things new to the world. He's going to form them into a community of unity that displays, they're almost like an advance party of the new creation in the world. And he's telling them, go and tell. But you know, when he says all of this, there's one person that wasn't there. There is one person that was missing. But Thomas, called twin. Have you ever wondered why he was called that? Just speculation. One of the 12 was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples were telling him, we've seen the Lord. They're practicing their new skill of go and tell. But he said to them, if I don't see the marks of the nails in his hands and put my finger into the marks of the nails and put my hand into his side, I will never believe. A week later, his disciples were indoors again and Thomas was with them. Even though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here and look at my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Do not be faithless, but believe. Thomas responded to him, my Lord and my God. Jesus said, because you've seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples that are not written in this book, but these are written so that you might believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you might have life in his name. Let's imagine at some point this morning you bust in for a pee, and so you disappear off that way to the toilet. While you're gone in the toilet, Tom Hanks appears through the door. Now, I'm saying Tom Hanks because he's somebody that everybody likes, isn't he? I was trying to think of somebody that, is there anyone here that really hates Tom Hanks? Right. It's always one, isn't there? And it's always you. So Tom Hanks walks in while you're relieving yourself, and because he's such a lovely guy, he's very self-effacing, isn't he? He's just a kind kind of bloke. Shakes lots of hands, says hi to lots of people, finds a baby to hug, won't stop for any pictures because he's really humble, and off he goes. You come back out of the toilet, and everybody's like, you never guess what just happened? Tom Hanks walked in. You're like, no way. Like, yeah, Tom Hanks walked in. Well, you got any evidence? Well, no, he didn't stop for any pictures. Well, I'm not going to believe you then, am I? Well, actually, you know whether Tom Hanks walked in or not? It really doesn't matter, does it? Does it change anybody's life if Tom Hanks walked in here this morning? No. And if it does change your life, you've got issues. Then let's imagine that, let's take it up a notch, that actually it was someone who was an absolute hero of yours, and you have missed out on seeing them. You're going to be pretty devastated, aren't you? But then let's take it up a notch even further. Put yourself in Thomas's shoes. He has given up absolutely everything to follow Jesus. He has bought into what Jesus said. He believed Jesus when Jesus said that he was going to restore the kingdom. He was going to make all things new. And now Jesus is dead. All your hope is gone. But these guys that you've been hanging out with for the last 3 years, they tell you that he's back. They're trying out their new skill of go and tell on you, but you missed it. What is it going to take to make you believe that he's alive? Now, the thing is, Thomas has been called Doubting Thomas for the last 2,000 years, right? What you see there, that's not doubt. Paul said earlier, I think Thomas was a scientist. Yeah? It's like, give me the evidence. Show me the facts. This isn't doubting Thomas. This is steadfast refusal to believe Thomas. But I understand why he's called doubting Thomas, because steadfast refusal to believe Thomas isn't quite as catchy, is it? And so he's been known as doubting Thomas. But actually, this is a skeptic. This is one who's saying, here is my list of evidence. Unless I see, unless I put, unless I touch, I will never believe that he is alive. Here is the list of evidence that I must have on that board, because otherwise, I'm not buying it. And you know, belief for John, in John's account of Jesus' life, belief is such a massive issue, because belief isn't just about the facts that you buy into. Belief is so much more than that. It's the kind of belief that if you were a gambling kind of person, you'd take all of your chips and put them on the Jesus square. You would put all of your eggs in the Jesus basket. Everything, once you see that this is true, you can't do anything but base your whole life around the truth of who Jesus is. It's a transformative belief. In fact, John says, to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. This kind of belief, it changes our family affiliation. It brings us into the family of God. This isn't just about facts. And this is a belief that Thomas doesn't have. Thomas isn't there. And so 1 week later, we have a rerun of the episode in the upper room. Once again, the disciples are together, but this time, Thomas is with them. And again, Jesus demonstrates that he doesn't have to obey the laws of physics and passes through this locked door, appears in the room with them, and once again says, "Peace be to you." And peace is with them because Jesus is with them. And then Jesus speaks to Thomas. Can you imagine the atmosphere in the room? Must have been quite electric, you know, as Jesus kind of looks Thomas in the face. And everybody knew that Jesus knew what Thomas had said just the week before. So what does Jesus say to Thomas at this point? Thomas, how dare you? How dare you not believe? I've been leaving you all of this evidence. I've been leaving you all of these facts. And yet, still, you know, I told you that I needed to die. I told you that I needed to come back to life. And still, you haven't believed. How dare you? Thankfully, that is not the Jesus that encounters Thomas. Instead, Jesus stands before Thomas with his hands outstretched and his side exposed. And lovingly, he's coming to Thomas, offering Thomas what he needs in order to believe. How amazingly kind and patient is Jesus. How gracious is Jesus. And then imagine you're Thomas, and Jesus is now looking you in the eyes. And what you're not seeing is disappointment and disapproval, but you're seeing love. And you're hearing an invitation to come and to receive what it is that you need in order to believe. And Jesus gives him this really gentle rebuke. Don't be faithless, but believe. Because for Thomas to believe is actually the very best thing for him. To all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. This is for Thomas's good that he believes. Total speculation, but you know, in that moment, you know, they talk about like having movie-style flashbacks when you hit a kind of significant moment in your life and you kind of run through every moment in your life. You can imagine Thomas having this like speed run-through of the entirety of his relationship with Jesus, remembering the first minute that Jesus called him, remembering watching Jesus tear up 2 fish and 5 loaves and feed him 5,000 people, remembering Jesus bringing sight to a blind man by rubbing mud on his eyes, remembering all of the conversations that you had with him, remembering all of the things that Jesus said that he was. He said, I am the bread of life. I'm the light of the world. I am the gate. I am the good shepherd. I am the true vine. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I'm the resurrection and the life. Oh, heck, he said he's the resurrection and the life. Lazarus, I was there when he raised Lazarus from the dead. I saw a dead man walk. He knew that he needed to die because the smell of the perfume from when Mary washed his feet was still filling his nostrils. And he remembered Jesus saying at that point, she is anointing me for my burial. He remembers the kind of squirming embarrassment as the one who he believes is king wraps a towel around his waist and humiliates himself as he washes feet. And he says, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like to be great in the kingdom of God. Go and serve just like this. And then he said, don't be troubled. Don't let your hearts be afraid. I'm going to stay with you. Even though I'm going to leave you, it's better that I go away because I'm going to be with you. I'm going to send one exactly like me. And then he died. But now he stands before you alive, and he's showing you these wounds in his hands, and he's showing you his side, and he's saying, see me, Thomas, see me, and believe. And you know, suddenly for Thomas, it all makes sense. It all makes sense. Jesus is who he says he is. Thomas sees. He really sees. And then does Thomas actually do what he said that he needed to do? There's an amazing painting by this dude. I'm not an artist at all, but there's this guy called Caravaggio, I think his name is. And like it's a pretty gruesome picture, but it's a gorgeous picture at the same time of Thomas actually like poking his finger into the wounds of Jesus. Does Thomas actually do that? No, he doesn't, because by that point he doesn't need to. These things that he said that he needed in order to believe, he doesn't need them anymore because he's seen Jesus. He sees and he believes. And belief isn't just buying into this set of facts. This belief is life-changing faith that recognizes who Jesus is. It recognizes that he's God of the universe. And you know, if he's God of the universe, then he's God of me. He is my Lord and he is my God. It's a belief of trust that on seeing who he is, it bets everything on Jesus. It puts all our eggs into the Jesus is alive basket. And you know, the amazing thing about Thomas is that Thomas really did put all his eggs in that basket. You want to know if something is true. Is somebody willing to die for it? Well, do you know, Thomas, after Pentecost, tradition has it that he went wandering off across Asia, down into India, and he was proclaiming all the way along the line, Jesus is alive, and this is good news for me, and it's good news for you, and he even died for it at the southern tip of India. And so Thomas really did see, and he really did believe, and then he really went and told. Because so convinced was he that this was true. And you know, Jesus then, once Thomas recognizes him for who he is, turns around and he says, because you've seen me, you've believed. And I think Thomas kind of gets bad press, doesn't he? Because you kind of think, well, all the other disciples and Mary, you know, they were amazing because they kind of got it. Well, no, they didn't. Jesus spoke to Mary. She heard his voice and she believed. John saw the grave clothes. He saw and he believed. Jesus appeared in the room to the disciples. They saw and they believed. And so they were all in the same boat as Thomas. But the thing is, you know, for us, we don't have that option. We can't time travel. And so we can't go back 2,000 years to see, did these things actually happen? And so then, can you almost see Jesus turn into us at this point, looking to us and having a conversation with us and saying, blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed, because he's speaking to us. And you know, whilst we have no choice because we can't time travel, and so we've got to take it on the witness testimony of other people. Look at this. This is what John says. He says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples that are not written in this book. Are you frustrated by that sentence? You should be. I find it the most frustrating sentence in the Bible. What did he do that you didn't write down? But the thing is, we don't need those things. And John knew that we didn't need those things because he's given us what we need. These things are written down so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you might have life in his name. And John's super keen that we know that everything that he's written down is true, because so many times he says the one who's writing these things is the one who saw them, and his testimony is true. We can trust what's written down. And you know, Peter, who was there and he saw it all, he reflected on these words years later when he's writing to a community of people that have come to follow Jesus without seeing. This is what he says. Though you've not seen him, he could equally be speaking to us. Though you've not seen him, you love him. Though you do not now see him, you believe in him and rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory. Yes. Thanks for that proclamation of glory there. Rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory, obtaining the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. Look at that. Though you do not now see him. What does that imply? One day, what you believe now, you will see. What you believe now, you will see. And believing without seeing is a place of hot joy, because the fact is that we are one day going to see what we believe for when we trust in Jesus. And John wrote all of this down so that we would have an evidence board that is peppered with proof that leads to this one hot joy conclusion that Jesus is the King and Jesus is alive. And actually, if Jesus is King and Jesus is alive, that changes everything. You see, the cross and the resurrection of Jesus are kind of the turning point of all of history. We talk about things being a crux point. A crux point is that kind of shape. Everything turns on the cross and the resurrection of Jesus. We live in a world that was made good by God, and as humans, we were made in his image to join with him in making the world a place of flourishing and joy and life, with God as our King and our Father living among us. But the first people, Adam and Eve, they rejected God's rule. They said that they could do a better job of ruling themselves. And when they did that, they cut themselves off from the source of life. And when you cut yourself off from the source of life, what you experience is death. That rejection of God's rule is called sin, and wherever there is sin, there is death. And so you have a bunch of people then who are all living for their own kingdoms, and those kingdoms come into conflict with each other. Do you need convincing that this is the reality of the world? You know, when we look at the world, we see and we believe, don't we? Because we see the chaos all around us that comes from sin and the destruction that follows. But the amazing thing is that God didn't reject his people. Instead, when he's fully entitled to reject these people that have rejected him, in love, he pursues. In love, the King himself becomes human, Jesus. And he declares to us what his kingdom looks like, what his rule looks like, the destruction, the undoing of death and evil. And so Jesus came and he healed the sick, he cleansed lepers, he cast out demons, he raised the dead, he loved the needy, he showed us what it means to be truly human. But most significantly, he comes to deal with the sin that is at the root of all of the mess and death that comes with sin. We have no ability to deal with sin for ourselves. And so he does. By dying on the cross, he absorbs all of the sin and evil and its consequences into himself. And he dies. But you know, because he's got no sin of his own, death can't hold him. And he defeats death from the inside out, and he rises from the dead. And then he invites us to participate in this victory over all the powers of darkness and evil. He says, come, believe in me and have life in my name. And you know, the resurrection, described by this guy called Tom Wright like this, he says, resurrection isn't simply death from another perspective. It is the reversal of death, its cancellation, the destruction of its power. And he calls us to be believing in him and to have life in his name, to be drawn into his family. And this Thomas-like belief that then comes to the place of saying, my Lord and my God, leads us to a place of happy surrender where we bow before him, because we realize that actually when we try and rule our worlds for ourselves, we make a total hash up of it. And he is much better at being king than we are. And so we bow before him, recognizing the true king, and then he begins to form us into an advanced party of the new creation that is changed by him into a community that displays forgiveness and reconciliation and love and his power. And you know, we still die physically. Every one of us will die physically. But there's no fear in that anymore. When we belong to Jesus, there is no fear, because if we belong to him, his resurrection becomes ours. This is what Paul said. So you see, just as death came into the world through a man, now the resurrection from the dead has begun through another man. Just as everyone dies because we all belong to Adam, everyone who belongs to Christ will be given new life. But there's an order to this resurrection. Christ was raised as the first of the harvest. Then all who belong to Christ will be raised when he comes back. After that, the end will come when he will turn the kingdom over to God the Father, having destroyed every ruler and authority and power. For Christ must reign until he humbles all his enemies beneath his feet, and the last enemy to be destroyed is death. Belonging to Jesus and him belonging to us is hope for this life and for forever. And you know, friends, I'm not going to lie. All of my eggs are in the Jesus is alive basket. All of my hope is in him. You know, if somebody were to wheel a corpse in here this morning and they could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that that corpse was Jesus, my hope is gone. I got nothing. But the fact is that so many people have tried and so many people have failed down the years, and they have failed because he is alive. And all of my eggs are in that basket. And so the question is, what is on my evidence board? What is on my evidence board? First of all, this is on my evidence board. I'm utterly convinced. This stands up to history. It stands up to fact. In the 32 years since Jesus met me, this has stood up to every single question that I've thrown at it. It has stood up to all of my confusion. That's lots of confusion and lots of questions over 32 years. And it has stood up to it all. And you know, what's written in here is powerful. It's powerful to transform because it's not just words on a page. God takes it and he uses it and he breathes life into it and he speaks through it. I have a friend who, he wasn't particularly interested in Jesus, and he would ask big questions about life, and I would always get the Bible out, and he would always mock me for getting the Bible out, because he'd say, oh, it took you 3 minutes to get the Bible out today. I'm like, well, what do you expect? You're asking me big questions. I've got to have somewhere where I go, because I don't have the wisdom for myself. Anyway, this one day he said, I need to meet you. I was like, right, okay. So we had a coffee in a cafe in town. It wasn't a very good cafe. The coffee wasn't very good. And as we sat across the table, he got the Bible out. And I was like, whoa now, what's going on? You don't get the Bible out first. And he said, I've been reading John's Gospel. And he said, as I've been reading it, he's popping off the page at me. He's real, isn't he? He's real. And he's alive. And if this is who he is, then I got no choice. I've got to follow him. And so this is powerful. It speaks. It's alive. But you know what? On top of that, God has spoken here, but he continues to speak through his presence. When we follow him, when we proclaim him as Lord and God, he comes to live in us and with us by his Spirit, his relational presence and power with us. And you know what? I'm not what I will be. Those of you who know me really well, you know that I'm far from the finished article. Such a long way to go. It's like if you had Michelangelo's David. I'm not comparing myself to Michelangelo's David, by the way. That'd be awkward. But I reckon there's kind of like a large block of marble with maybe about that much chipped off. So maybe you can see an arm exposed, but he's still got an awful long way to go. But you know what? By his grace and his presence living in me, I'm not what I was. And I'm heading towards what he is transforming me into. He's resurrecting me. He's bringing me to life. And he's preparing me to be fully part of that new creation when he comes and he makes all things new. And you know what? It's not just my own subjective experience. If I had that evidence board there would be so many of your faces that would be on there, because I have seen the power of the risen Jesus at work, transforming and changing, taking people who are caught up and bound by addictions to behaviors that are destructive and bringing them into a place of life and freedom. People who are angry and unforgiving being brought to a place of grace and loving and being able to extend the same forgiveness to others that he has extended to them. People who have been in desperate places of sadness and grief, and God bringing them through that sadness and grief by his presence and his power in them, and bringing them to a place of joy in the middle of grief and sadness. People who are lonely that have been brought into a family. Those who are broken almost beyond repair, being transformed in a process bit by bit of being made whole people. People who are utterly without hope, being filled up on hope that comes with his presence. And you know what, friends? He's still offering the same today. This is the same Jesus who continues to offer the same today, the same King who stands, hands outstretched, side exposed, and says, "See me and believe. Come and have life in my name." This is what he's offering. He says to all who believed him, to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. This is a welcome into his family. This is a welcome at the ever-extending table of the Father. And you know what? Then he says, to those of us who have received him, to those who believed in his name and have been drawn into his family, he says, go and tell the world that I'm alive, because this is good news. And so now, let's celebrate because he's alive.